The Office of the Ombudsman for Banking Services says it's been inundated with complaints from people who fall behind with their vehicle repayments and have their cars repossessed by banks. Ombudsman Rihanna Steyn says that the first legal principle for customers to understand is that under vehicle financing agreements, the vehicle remains the property of the bank until the loan is fully repaid. She joins us now to clarify the nuances of vehicle finance. Thank you so much, Ombudsman Steyn, for joining us on Newsnight this evening. So can you first just give us some context on the increase in repossessions and what kind of figures we're looking at compared to last year, for instance?
Yeah, good evening. So I think the reason why we put out the press release is really to educate consumers, because we've seen approximately an 18% increase in the vehicle repossession complaints in our office. Now that in our numbers, we deal with about 8,000 complaints per year. That's significant. But I think more alarming is the number of calls. Our call center reports that they are receiving numerous calls on a daily basis from consumers talking about prescription matters, asking what's happening and how does that work. And then many of those matters where they think the claim is prescribed also then relates to a vehicle finance, where they have not been paid and they also haven't received any summonses. So they think the claim of the bank is prescribed and they're asking us for more information and advice, or they want to log a complaint. So definitely an increase in the repossession complaints that we've seen. And we think that it is necessary for consumers to understand what their rights and obligations are.
Just perhaps in very sort of simple layman's terms, explain to us what that term prescribed debt actually means.
Yeah, so it's not always easy to put it in a very short sentence, but I think in basic for consumers to understand, if a period of 3 years elapses and in our case, the banks have not contacted you and you have not acknowledged the debt and you haven't paid the debt, then you can say that the claim of the bank has prescribed. They cannot legally pursue the claim. So then you talk about in layman's terms, the debt is prescribed, the claim is prescribed.
And sorry, just to jump in there, that's only the debt that has then lapsed or prescribed. That's not to do with ownership then of the vehicle, which is where the question for consumers comes in, correct?
Most definitely. So obviously, if you just talk about a money debt, then the debt is gone and there's nothing else to do, and the bank cannot then take legal action. But now in this matter, there's a vehicle, and the vehicle remains the property, the legal property of the bank. So even if they cannot claim the debt on the vehicle finance agreement, that property remains theirs, and they can come and get that vehicle back from you. They of course have to follow a legal process. They cannot just arrive at your house or send somebody to come and take the vehicle back. They have to follow the court process, but the vehicle remains their property, and that is what I think so many consumers unfortunately do not understand.
Okay. Perhaps you can give us some clarity on exactly what those legal processes are that the bank has to follow and what consumers' rights are in that same vein.
Yeah, so I think let's start just with a comment that, we always encourage consumers to pay their debts. It is futile to try and avoid the bank, the calls and the emails and approaches from the bank if you have this vehicle in your possession and you owe the debt. Because what is happening is that the debt is just keeping on getting bigger every month with more interest as long as you're not paying. And the value of the vehicle, of course, gets smaller and lower. So by the time the vehicle is eventually repossessed, and it will happen, and they sell the vehicle, then you are still going to be liable for that outstanding debt. And by now it is a much bigger debt with a much lower value for the vehicle. So it's definitely better to repay, or if you cannot repay, to take action. So one of the things you can do as a consumer, you can voluntarily surrender the vehicle. So this is a right in terms of the National Credit Act to assist a consumer to get out of the agreement, which they can no longer afford. So it's for the consumer to contact the bank and say, I cannot afford this vehicle. Let's rather sell it now and pay off the debt with the brief funds of the sale. And if there's a small shortfall, then the consumer remains liable for that shortfall. And of course, if the vehicle sells for more than the debt, they will be entitled to that money. That is their right in terms of the Act. That doesn't mean that somebody can arrive at your house and force you to sign a document which says that you are voluntarily surrendering the vehicle. This is really meant for a consumer contacting the bank on their behalf, or that they want to do it. So be very careful for somebody who just arrives and forces you or tries to force you to sign documents. You do not have to do that. So that's something important. And then the bank has to follow a legal process by sending a letter of demand, which is called a 129, Section 129 letter, warning the consumer that these are the consequences. They will list the consumer on the credit bureaus. They will take legal action, which is a summons that will be served, and then a judgment. And then eventually the vehicle will also be then, sort of declared executable, and a sheriff of the court will come and remove the vehicle. So those are the two, actions that can take place. Either the consumer can surrender the vehicle if they can't pay, or the bank will, if there's just no action, no negotiation, no scheduling of the payments, they will have to take action and to protect their interests and take legal action.
Now, some consumers think that if the bank can't contact them, for instance, if they purposefully obfuscate or hide their current contact details, that there's no way that that vehicle can be repossessed. But that's just dodging a bullet that is eventually going to come, isn't it?
That's exactly what we're saying, and that's what we're seeing as well. We get those phone calls at the moment from consumers telling us that the banks contacted or found them in parking lots and at shopping centers. I'm not sure exactly how, what technology the banks are using to actually trace these vehicles. But of course, once they see the vehicle in a parking lot, they have to wait for the consumer to come out with their shopping. And there's somebody from the bank or, a representative saying they're here to repossess the car. So definitely not a good idea to try and run away, because, as I say, the debt will just keep on growing, and it's very unlikely that they will completely forget about you. And if you've been waiting for 2 years, yes, maybe, for 2 years you haven't paid, but can you imagine what the outstanding interest is by that time? So much rather to contact the bank right from the start if you are experiencing financial problems, and see what you can work out. If there's another repayment plan, if there's maybe a possibility of extending the loan or a smaller payment, or, as I say, then the voluntary surrender, if that is the best option.
And of course, in a situation where we're seeing so many people under immense financial pressure, that willingness to make an arrangement also has an impact on your overall credit score. What is the impact of not making contact with your bank, not making those arrangements on your broader financial health and how other creditors might view you?
Yeah, so I think it's very detrimental to a consumer. If you are struggling financially, if you make rearrangement payments with the banks or any other credit provider, you are in a much better position than being listed by everybody on the bureau as a non-payer, as a defaulter, and eventually with judgments. Even if you're only behind or struggling with the vehicle finance, if you can make an arrangement to ensure that you are not listed as a defaulter on the credit bureau and there's no judgment, I mean, obviously your whole financial future is going to look much better, because once you are listed and in a year's time, you now you're back on your feet and now you can buy another car, but there's a judgment sitting, or, that defaults, people are going to be loath to enter into new credit agreements with you. So very detrimental to just leave matters, because one day you want to maybe, as I say, enter into new credit, you've got a new job, things are looking up, and now you want credit or buy a house and nobody wants to assist you. So not the best plan.
Right, thank you so much for speaking to us. That was Rihanna Steyn, the Banking Services Ombudsman. We do appreciate your insights into this issue.